More. Well, I guess I'm going to take that statement to heart more so than I ever have. SEC's in quite a feud right now. It is Jimbo Fisher. It's Nick Saban. We got Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown Alabama, and also his show In My Own Words right here on YouTube. Catch it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 Central. Again, we want to dive into the back and forth that has been ensuing between two of college football's best coaches. Stephen, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm having a great day. I had to speak to some awesome children today, had to deliver some encouraging words to my youth today here in Birmingham. And I never thought that as I'm in shirt and tie and statement to the youth here, the two bickering brothers, I didn't think I would see Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher go at it like this. It started off late last night. Coach Saban with some shots there toward the Texas A&M #1 class for 2022 at the Birmingham Countdown to the World Games event. And then we all know Jimbo, not one to sit down. He's always been more so of a fiery personality. And boy, was he fiery today at the A&M press conference. In the middle of me talking to my kids, here comes Jimbo going right at Coach Saban and did not hold back. So, SEC Media Days coming up here in July. And, of course, the October 8th matchup between Alabama and Texas A&M and Tuscaloosa. Some big blood coming in here.
The first time we saw Jimbo Fisher get fired up on the topic was just after National Signing Day when Lane Kiffin made a quip about a luxury tax having to be implemented against Texas and Texas A&M. Jimbo fired back concerning that, basically calling coaches that were coming after particular programs irresponsible. They didn't know what they were talking about. They were doing things the right way at Texas A&M. Things had calmed down to a certain extent, and then Nick Saban addressing the group last night, basically comparing his number 2 ranked class to A&M's #1 class, basically saying, and he's been on this path for the last few weeks, not targeted at Texas A&M necessarily before this, but just about NIL being out of control. We got to get a hold of this. We need to understand where we are and do the right things going forward. And a lot of suggestions on what the NCAA and others need to be doing to fend off litigation and all sorts of potential issues.
It's been more so of that conversation, Mark, at first from Coach Saban. It's been having this be regulated, having an oversight there, getting more of a developmental thing when it comes down to NIL. But on last night, comes right at, Jimbo Fisher with, we have the number 2 class, A&M had the number 1 class, and A&M bought every player they had. And the moment that statement comes out, social media went crazy, like a nuclear bomb dropped, on Twitter. And very sensitive topic here, as of right now, because when you talk about it, these athletes have to go to these third parties to get these deals, these different organizations, these different businesses and foundations. So it's not like you're getting the NIL from the school itself. You're getting these deals from these third party people. And I know on social media there have been different rumors going around about how did Jimbo Fisher really go about the NIL class. He ended up getting the number 1 class in the country. The young men want to go play for Texas A&M, and of course Jimbo is going to stick up for his guys, his players, the families that his players come from, the organization. There have been a few collective people in A&M that work with their NIL department. They've come out and saying how Jimbo's did nothing wrong. He handled it right. He did it the right way. But I think the tipping point of it all, Mark, was where Jimbo said, I've worked with Coach Saban. I've been around the guy. This is despicable, narcissist. And when the narcissist word came out, that hit the earbug strong. That hit the earbug hard, because now you've got different players on both sides of the program talking about it. You've got family members talking about it. Like this has created a bit of a war here right now.
Let's understand first and foremost that there's more rumor and speculation out there concerning NIL than there is known fact, because it's not the responsibility of the player to let us know how much they're earning. That's up to just themselves. The school has to keep track of it, and the IRS. So they can just they can disclose that information if they'd like, but if they don't, then there's all sorts of speculation. We had James Coleman, former Florida State running back, on here the other day, who's an NIL part of a group there. And he says, some of these figures out there are just that people are adding zeros on. It's not that crazy when it comes to the amount of money that most are making. Not that that should be a concern. It should be more a concern. Are we following the rules, and are the rules fair to everyone, and those sorts of things? So the paying of players, when this first kicked off with Lane Kiffin, I was thinking, Lane, you could make a comment against Jimbo Fisher, but somebody else could take a shot at you from a lower, let's say a group of 5, to say, well, we don't have the money Ole Miss has, because as long as it's being done correctly, that's the issue. And then you're pointing to the strong language of Jimbo Fisher in particular. They both came out strong. There's no question.
They did.
Saban was going right after Texas A&M and Jimbo, but then Jimbo shot back with, the term despicable. His actions being despicable, talking about, hey, look into his past. You wouldn't want to know the things that he's done. He acts like God. He thinks he's the czar of college football.
I'm telling you, and what this does, Mark, is it makes you all the more want to understand what is this NIL going to really do in terms of college football? Because if it's got coaches in a bunch like this, if it's got players in a bunch like this, if this has got collective groups in a bunch like this, and we're still basically in the early stages of this, what is it going to look like years down the road if we're already seeing disgruntledness from, like you mentioned, Mark, 2 of the best? When you talk about Nick Saban and you talk about Jimbo Fisher, and then you even got Deion Sanders involved. Coach Saban was talking about, Jackson State paid a player $1 million. And here comes Deion. Like, whoa. Why you got to throw my name in this? So here comes Deion out in here. So if it's already this type of a buildup now, and we're just in the early stages of this thing, years down the road, that's my concern.
Stephen, this has to be striking a serious nerve, because coaches by nature, even when they're baited by the media, typically don't criticize other coaches, typically are very above board. And even if you can tell that they're angry or don't like another individual, they still pay them respect. You got to really read between the lines, but they are just at the throat. And the comment that really got to me was that Saban has apparently reached out to Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo will not take his call. Once says, I will not have anything to do with him.
We knew coming into this thing, Mark, NIL was going to be some pros and there were going to be some cons. We knew this coming in. Last night until today, we're seeing the cons right here. Because like you mentioned, normally coaches would keep things close to the vest. They would keep their feelings reserved. They would not just go all out like this. But when you see the gloves come off like this from Coach Saban to start, and now Jimbo Fisher sort of defending himself, so to speak, you've got Lane Kiffin. He's throwing little darts out there here and there. You've got Deion Sanders wondering, why is my name thrown up in here? Like, when you've got the gloves coming off early on, this is how we know there is something to this NIL thing that if we don't get to the bottom of this quickly, it can be some problems.
Stephen, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to make a couple statements about how I think most of us feel we would like to see this NIL proceed. Number one, we've thought for years and years and years, there needs to be an avenue for these athletes to earn money. They are making billions for the schools, the universities, the conferences, etc. They can't make money as an employee. We didn't want to go that route. But we got 14 and 15-year-olds going on TikTok making zillions of dollars, making silly videos that these athletes should be able to benefit from their name, image, and likeness. So we hit this point. So there are very few people that have an issue with that. I want them to be able to market their celebrity. Absolutely. but we want it done, I think, in a clean way, meaning we don't want the 17-year-old just selecting school A because they're throwing the most money at him. We would like the process of recruiting to be as clean as possible, that they're still choosing the football school based on the school based on the football program, the relationship with the coaches, the academic pursuits that they want to make. And then once they get there, go through the NIL opportunities and benefit from that way, but not just to kind of go to the largest bidder. And then once they get into school, to be jumping schools based on, again, largest bidder. So it's a bit of a mess right now.
It is. And at the start of it, Mark, and I agree with you, I have always been one for the student athletes being compensated for what they do. When you look at the money they bring to the universities, the money they bring to the state, the money they bring in terms of ticket sales and revenue. When the EA Sports college football game was out, the money that was being made off that, off the likeness of the player. So for the longest of time, I myself want to see a compensation for these young men because they deserve it, but also wanting to have this done to where we don't have a situation like we have today. Now, I understand Alabama is different from, lower, all the higher tier programs, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, your Clemsons, your Texas A&Ms, your Texases, they're different from a lot of these lower tier programs, but at the same time, you still want that done in a way to where the school is pleased, the student athlete is pleased, the third party is pleased, and we're not having a moment where coaches are going at coaches. Players are going at a program because, well, this program A said they'd give me, $30,000, but program B said they're going to give me $50,000. We're not trying to have that, because that's where a lot of the confusion, a lot of the chaos, a lot of the trouble stems from. And just today, like I said, Mark, I was shocked. I was kind of just really taken aback by these two coaches, highly respected in what they do. Jimbo Fisher's a national champion. Nick Saban, a national champion. And prior to the day, two men that had a healthy respect for each other. Oh, I thought so. A healthy respect for each other. And now it's like, that healthy respect is, I don't know where that is. And then in terms of Nick Saban and Deion Sanders, I'm wondering, can the Aflac Duck mend this relationship?
Yeah, it's interesting that there's that sideline to it, that sidebar in regards to their relationship on air with Affleck and all the work that they've done together there. And it just so happens that Saban makes the comment about Travis Hunter, and then Deion fires back. Well, I got to say this, Stephen, and I want to respect your time. So certainly just jump off whenever you need to. Just cut me off. Let me know when you need to get going. But shoot, we could talk about this all day. I believe that the college football fan that believes in Nick Saban and his integrity, let's forget about the football, but in regards to the man and his integrity, we just lost Steven right there. So he's cutting off. The point that I was going to be making there about Nick Saban is that Nick Saban typically goes after institutions, goes after rules, goes after policies that he doesn't like. He typically comes out during SEC media days each and every summer, and he typically has a theme, a narrative that he wants to attack, to basically say, this is what's on my mind. This is what is damaging college football at an SEC level or a national scale right now, and we need to address it. So he's typically not personal in his attacks. Now, by extension, there are going to be some people involved that it doesn't shed a good light on, but he's almost never personal in terms of taking it to somebody. Now, if he's got to defend himself and his program, he's been on rare occasions in the past personal in that way, but never on the offensive. So for the believer of Nick Saban, in terms of his character and integrity, you would think, okay, he was very upfront in this meeting with his Birmingham business and leadership group concerning Alabama's collective, that about 25 Alabama players had received NIL money this past season, that And so he was specific in terms of the number of players and the amount of money. We don't know if that's accurate, but the amount of money in which Alabama has collected for its players. So for him to, if you're pro Saban, you've got to be thinking there has to be something with the way Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M and A&M is doing it that he believes to be not above board, not according to the rules, not according to the guidelines and the rules and the spirit of what's going on. And Saban was fairly specific about that in a few comments. Okay. Anybody who's anti-Saban, doesn't necessarily trust or believe in his integrity or character, would simply say, Alabama does not have so much money in its collective as Texas A&M. And Nick Saban sees things slipping away in regards to leverage and ability to sign the best players, and sees Texas A&M taking over and spending the most money. And maybe it's legit money, but he's seeing the advantages that he has had and built slipping away from him, and he's just mad, upset, doesn't like the situation. And Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M aren't doing anything wrong, but Nick Saban is mad about it. So you can take one of two sides. I really have no idea because I don't know the men personally. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. So I almost went live last night. I saw this break about 12:30, and I will say that I received my information, excuse me, from the ESPN reports coming down. From Dave Wilson would be the most recent article, and that was the Jimbo Fisher rebuttal. So these guys are taking it full bore head on in terms of speaking this stuff in public, especially Jimbo Fisher, because Saban was speaking to a group that obviously made its way to Jimbo Fisher. And then Jimbo Fisher called a news conference and ranted for about 10 minutes and laid it all out there. So check out the back and forth there. We're not going to go through all of it, of course, verbatim, but we said much of it during our conversation with Stephen Smith. All right. We appreciate everybody being here. Let's get to your comments. And yes, let's see if we can catch up with the comments. I'm going to go against the recommendations and suggestions of everybody who doesn't want me to go back to the beginning. Ferris says he's going to make some popcorn. I'm not a big popcorn guy, but you enjoy, Ferris. Yes, Joey. Hatfields and the McCoys. This is, and they're both from West Virginia. Good point. That's a, you nailed it, Joey, with the connection there. This is crazy. This is crazy. LBC Trojans. Saban broke the SEC coaches mafia code. No snitches. Well, I don't know. I think there have been snitching going on in the SEC. I think the SEC is notorious, not publicly, but there was a reason why when I was covering the SEC, of course, I cover the SEC now, but I mean as a professional on the scene at the practices, at the news conferences, when I covered the SEC in the back half of the 90s into 2000, every program in the SEC at one point when I was there was on probation. I think there are snitches all over the SEC. Harry says listening skills are not being taught as not 1/1000th heard what Saban said, but what they thought he said. Okay. Without being specific, we have no idea what you're talking about necessarily. And so we've got all sorts of figures out here. Like Lemansky's saying, podcast source, Nebraska NIL pay for play, $500,000. Well, it better not be pay for play. They need to be doing something on the side in addition to playing football to earn the money. And that's not a difficult thing to do. So if the players are being paid for play and are not doing anything in addition to that, to earn the NIL, then that's obviously an issue because it's not supposed to be pay for play. But you can easily come up with any kind of NIL agreement to cover that. Shoot, send out some Instagram posts. Boom, there you made your $50,000. We hope it's a good one, D-Rock Irish. This is a topic that's difficult to get a handle on. It's not like previewing a game. Goodness gracious. Andrew Hattersley from Gig'em 247 Sports. We expect to talk to him Friday morning. Unfortunately, Andrew is tied up today. Yeah, D Brown 2020. That was the aim and the goal there. And the intent is to go Texas A&M, Alabama, but we would not expect them to be going toe-to-toe. They don't represent the universities. Cody says, I'm taking Jimbo's side. You don't want the fight. Don't provoke the beast in a man. I don't take sides right now because I don't know what the truth is. We know that we can pay players. We are at a position where we can pay players, not for play, but they can be paid for name, image, and likeness. So whether they're selling iced tea like Bo Nix, or they are simply sending out Instagram posts, whatever they're doing that results in their football playing on the field and capitalizes on their name, image, and likeness and their celebrity, it's all fair game. The real MVP, Deion Sanders, has responded via Twitter. Deion Sanders said, I will have to go to the other article. So I am going to the article from Alex Scarborough from late last night, about midnight. So his direct quote from Deion Sanders' Twitter is, quote, you best believe I will address that lie. There are strong words, verbiage going on out there. I don't think we've ever seen this. People, anybody let me know in the history of college football that we have, in less than 15 hours, we have three major figures in college football for different reasons. Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher, and Deion Sanders calling each other, they act like God. They're despicable. Czar, he thinks he's the czar of college football. He lies. So Deion Sanders, again, quote, you best believe I will address that lie. So to your point, the real MVP, I guess he does say he's going to respond to it. So he's responding here, but he's going to respond in detail later. I'm going to address that lie in caps, Coach Saban told Tomorrow. Deion, not the best with the grammar here, so let's clarify. You best believe that I will address that lie Coach Saban told, tomorrow. So I guess he's going to comment today, Thursday, on Saban. I was and awakened by my son, Shedeur Sanders, that sent me the article stating that we paid. I think Deion, like some other public figures I can think of, should probably have a tweet editor. All sorts of misspellings in this thing. Anyway, that we pay Travis Hunter $1 million to play at Jackson State football. We as a people don't have to pay our people to play with our people. I think we can all speculate on what he's talking about when he says our people. I don't want to say it for sure because I might be wrong, but I'm about 99% sure what Deion Sanders means when he says our people playing with our people don't have to convince our people. Ed Rogers, the SEC is an embarrassment of epic proportions. You got a point there. You got Lane Kiffin. So Lane Kiffin, even though he's been the most subtle of the three that have commented on this, that have gained attention, it's been commented on by every coach in the SEC, but the ones that have gained attention, in a sense, Lane Kiffin was the most irresponsible in his comments because he did not accuse Jimbo Fisher of doing anything wrong, but basically said that they were just had more money to pay players than anybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing against the rules that certain universities have more resources than others. So Lane Kiffin was simply complaining. That's all he was doing. He was just mad that Texas A&M had more money than Ole Miss to build a collective if it was all done legally and above board. And so Lane Kiffin was just whining. These guys are going at it in a sense, basically saying that guy's doing it wrong. He is against the rules. Saban says Jimbo's against the rules in building this 22 recruiting class. And then Jimbo's firing back to say Saban's got a history of doing things under the table. So I can respect that more than I can respect Lane Kiffin whining about how much money Texas A&M has. So the coach at Memphis can whine about how much money Ole Miss has. D Brown 2020 says Jimbo was talking a lot of nothing. I don't know if he was talking a lot of nothing. He wasn't as specific as Saban. So I'll credit Saban with being specific, both in defending Alabama and then also calling out specific coaches and players, or coaches and the player, Travis Hunter at Texas State. Where Jimbo, if you're on the defensive, why does he need to be specific? He's just basically saying, we're not doing anything wrong, and Nick Saban's got a ton of skeletons in his closet. Exploring with Ben, appreciate you being here and encouraging everyone to hit the like button. That's what I played out there just a few minutes ago, the two scenarios, whether you believe in Saban and his integrity and character or you don't. And Lifeo Bill. Oh, gotcha. Life of Bill right there is siding with the latter, that he's basically saying Saban's mad because he doesn't have bank. And now he's playing under different rules, and Alabama does not have the bank of the schools in Texas. Easy money saying that, but how do we know that's the case? Well, that's what Saban is saying. Yes. Yes, Ferris, they're calling each other out in public now. They've done it for years. They've run to the NCAA for years. Now they're taking it public. Has anyone ever seen an NIL contract? We had a discussion with a guy who certainly has. Our guy, Big James Coleman. Big Game James Coleman was on the other day to talk about the NIL and his NIL group, not specifically with the, well, he did detail how an NIL is run because he used his group as an example. Ferris, name a Big Ten team under suspicion. The schools that we're hearing about are Texas A&M, Texas, USC, Miami. All right. Falconer X, appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Super sticker from you. Thank you so much. Hopefully you caught up with our Miami show last night. Hopefully you had a nice birthday dinner with your wife last night, Falconer X. Nice job by you. And I don't want to miss the other contribution from Falconer X here. Truthfully speaking the truth of the matter is that NIL has leveled the playing field. Well, I don't know if it's leveled the playing field. I think it all depends on the resources of the. I would expect, by and large, that the same teams that can dominate pre-NIL can dominate post-NIL to an extent. But we're going to see other players come into it and already have who were not the elite, and some of the elites that may not have the capabilities and the resources to keep up with their elite status. Tom believes they're both cheating. And the thing is do they really need to cheat at this point? Isn't it wide open enough and there enough leeway out there to collect money, distribute the money, get the players on campus, show them what they're able to get via NIL? As I stated to Stephen Smith a few minutes ago, and most of you weren't on board yet, this is generally what I want. I want the players to be able to benefit just like anybody else in society and make as much money as they can. If a player can make $50 million a year NIL, so be it. As long as it's legal, above board, and it's coming from a collection of businesses, business owners outside the university. And the university is just tracking it, collecting it, tracking it, and the player can make $1 zillion. This is America. If tomorrow we didn't have 261 people on here, we had 260 million people on here. And YouTube would have to pay me the ad revenue from that, and all sorts of people donated, and I'm suddenly making $50 million for doing exactly the same thing. And I could have a ton of critics saying, this guy just talks about college football and he makes $50 million. It's the American way, as long as it's done above board. So the first thing that I would like to see, and I admit it would be difficult to regulate, but I want these 17-year-old kids to make a college decision based on where they want to play football, the location of the school, what they want a degree in. And I know some of you are going to laugh at that, and I will as well. But let's keep in mind that if they're smart, if they're thinking it through, they're at school to learn a trade, a skill, a business, or to make business connections. Even if they have no idea what they want to study and could care less, they've got to be thinking, and I'm not talking about Travis Hunter, who's going to be playing in the NFL. I'm talking about, let's go a cut below that. They better be going to college thinking about learning something that they can do the rest of their lives, or at least making business connections that they can capitalize on for the rest of their lives. Because do we know any sources out there that have done the math on how many of these guys, let's take the Power Five, how many go on to play in the NFL and make substantial enough money to continue with the rest of their lives based on their football playing ability? and how much money they made in the NFL. It's very few. So I would like, and I think this is reasonable, for these student athletes to make a decision on where they're going to go to school and play football. And I'll still use that order: go to school, play football, based on where they want to play football. Who's going to win championships? Who's going to win? What coach do I want to play for that's going to develop me? What coaching staff? Who treated me well? Business relationships, working relationship, personal relationship. We hear that all the time in recruiting. It's been huge in the past. I hope that it still is, that the relationship built between the head coach, the position coach, and the player has been huge in the recruiting process. Also, who's going to develop me for the NFL? What do I want to study? And is this a good school for it? Where do I want to go? Do I want to stay close to home? Do I want to go far away? All those things that have traditionally been in the mind of the elite college athlete, that's what I want the decision to be made on. And sure, they're going to have all sorts of sources that are going to be able to let them know Texas A&M's got a huge NIL. Shoot, they talk. They can contact all sorts of players already on the team and say, how much money you making NIL? I make 50 grand a year. I make 125 grand a year, whatever it is. So they can collect that information on their own. We can't stop them from doing that. But we need to outlaw, whatever term you want to use, NIL suitors, boosters, collectors, the collection being presented to the player before they commit, sign, and enroll at a school. That's the first thing I want. And again, are we going to be able to enforce that to the nth degree? Like the speeding limit? No. But like the speed limit, catch some people and hammer them. Obliterate their program. If they are found to have set up NIL contracts and agreements and relationships before the player commits, signs, enrolls at the school, slap that school with like a $5 million fine, strip 20 scholarships away, don't let them see postseason play for 4 years. Like, hammer that school. So that's the first thing that I would like to see done. And the next one is simple. Enforce the one-time transfer rule. We will see players play at 2 schools max. Graduate school, okay, there's a possibility there. I know that it bothers some of you that 17 and 18-year-old student athletes can earn far more money than you've ever seen. And I get that. But it's the American way, as long as it's done legally. What I think bothers most of us is that a player is going to jump from school to school based on how much money they can make. That we need to root that out of college football with the transfer rule. Enforcing the transfer rule. We all like to know that our players are going to play for our school and continue to play for that school. They're committed to that school. And I'm not even saying that that's an easy process to follow through on, because, and James Coleman and I talked about this the other day, that if you go to said school and you expect to be a major player there and things don't work out for you and you have opportunity to go elsewhere and play and you don't where you are, should we force the player to stay at a school where he's buried on the depth chart? Dogo Daddy, how about outlawing the illegal recruiting that's been going on? It's like punishing the user and not touching the dealer. Leo Lewis, ring a bell. Redacted off the record testimony, ring a bell. Absolutely. It is outlawed. It's just not enforced properly or effectively. David, I understand your frustration with players sitting out bowl games because the NFL is waiting. I don't know how to regulate that, though. The only way I can think of regulating that is by putting it in the stipulation of the scholarship. The scholarship's a contract in and of itself that I've signed a contract to play for this school, play for this team through this season. And as long as I'm healthy and can play football, then just like I'm not going to sit out a regular season game and opt out, I'm not going to sit out a bowl game. Because basically, by that point in the season, the player's waiting for the NFL, preparing for the NFL, doesn't care about school anymore because he's going to get drafted. So there's really nothing prohibiting a player from opting out. All right. Jeff is asking very, very, in a very courteous way, and a real MVP, please make this a call-in show. All right. I'm going to let you guys fire off. Give me 2 seconds here. Where's my phone? Appreciate all of you being here. I thought that this would strike a nerve. Struck a nerve with me, certainly.
Thank you for enter your 6-digit PIN number. Welcome, host. You have not started a show session in call-in studio and cannot yet receive calls on Mark Rogers' Voice of College Football. Please visit the call-in studio website and begin your session. Music will play until your session begins, or you may call back when you are ready.
They are a liar every time. Yeah, we've all lied at some point. I make a distinction, though, between somebody who has lied at some point in their life versus somebody who's a liar. Oh, you guys are getting to hear all this business, aren't you? Maybe you're not. Maybe you are. I can't tell exactly. I think you are. Give me just 1 second. That is hideous, isn't it?
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface.
Calls at 860-499-3332. And before I post a number on the ticker below, check out the ticker. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, most effective way to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. Just look me up at MarkRogersTV. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Also keep in mind, when you shop Amazon, and most of you do, the statistics tell us that, when you shop Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section of the videos. If you spend $100 at Amazon, you are sending Amazon $100. Why not send Amazon like $95 and the Voice of College Football $5? If you use the link in the description section, you're still spending $100. And Amazon, I checked this, I Googled this the other day, is worth this is insane, $1.56 trillion. So send us 1%, 5%, 3%, depends on the item when you shop on Amazon. All right. Let's get to our first call here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's J-Dub calling in, the Bama alum, want to talk about Nick Saban, if you believe it or not.
Oh, boy. Yeah. What you got for us, J-Dub?
I tell you, well, first off, I want to say something. This is a true story here. I knew a girl, a daughter of a friend of mine, a real small town here in rural Iowa, who during her junior high and high school years, which would have been the early teens, I think she has since graduated from Iowa State. She had a YouTube channel in which she did teen fashion, girls makeup, girls how to decorate your bedroom, things like that. She had a huge following. Actually, got some business from Disney. She by the time she entered college had made over, and I know this because I know her family, had made over 6 figures. Now, before she even got into college now. So I don't begrudge these kids making money. I just wanted to get that out of the way right away. I mean, there's all sorts of young kids out there making money. It's not like it's just these football players all of a sudden.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some people are going to begrudge it, but they're always going to begrudge people that make more money than they do. So that's just a level of jealousy. But yeah, there are people out there, to your point, J-Dub, there are people out there making far more money than these guys are doing silly things, like doing stupid dance routines on TikTok.
Yeah, what I think about the Saban comments is I wanted to take a third angle I have not seen anybody address yet. And I can't believe it wasn't the main focus of what he said. Am I the only one that heard Saban call for the NCAA to receive some kind of antitrust protection?
Yes.
Go back and listen to his comment. That's the bomb, guys. That's the bomb. Not taking the shot at the other school. Saban is saying, unless you protect the NCAA from these frivolous lawsuits, or change the NCAA into the authority, whatever you're going to call it, unless you give someone authority over the game and protect them from lawsuits so that they can actually enforce the rules, it will remain the Wild West. And I think that's what Saban was saying. Saban was saying is, look, X is going to have more money than Y. A is going to have more money than Z. D is in a better location than F. But make the guidelines the same. And right now, there's no enforcing power. Like you've always mentioned the one-time transfer rule. They can't enforce it. He's saying put the teeth back in. And maybe what he's saying about Jimbo, and remember, he's talking to a room of Alabama boosters. He's talking to people that he wants to write a check so that he's got more money to play with. That's part of what he's saying. I mean, that's part of his message is, hey, fellas, right here, you guys need to pony up because look what's happening over there. I think what he was saying about some of these other schools is, without these guidelines, all sorts of shady is going to happen or be accused of happening. We've got to protect the NCAA with antitrust legislation. And I haven't heard anybody say that until he said that last night.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's the one statement that he made that really is all encompassing of what the issue is and how it can be handled. The rest of it's just, he certainly was very upfront about what's going on, but just using Jackson State, Miami, and Texas A&M as examples of what's going to happen without that enforcement. And to your point, you make a good point about the transfer rule. So there was a point in which it was enforced, but when a few players challenged it, the NCAA started to cave in, and now it's probably in fear of litigation.
Right.
And because that that there is a clause in there, and I don't know it verbatim, but there's a clause in there about hardship cases that, if you've already transferred, but then you have a family member who has a serious illness or disease, something like that comes up where there's a hardship, then that's going to be waived. And there were rare cases where that would happen every 3 or 4 years. But then those hardship situations started to become more and more just, I'm mentally distressed about the situation here, or I'm being, all sorts of situations, and the NCAA just caved into any waiver request. Anybody could make up anything as being a hardship.
Yes, and I thought Saban had an interesting point. He said he talked about women's tennis, women's golf, baseball, softball. He didn't know the number, but he was probably somewhere in the ballpark. Talked about 450 scholarship athletes at the University of Alabama. How many of them are going to make NIL money? How many of them are going to make money at their professional sport? Most of which don't even have professional sports that they're taking part in. He's talking about this was a way. Oh, look at all these kids that get to come to school now, get a scholarship, get to come to school, get to better themselves, get to create value for themselves, is what he likes to say. Have the opportunity to earn a degree. He mentioned that Bama is leading the nation in players who graduate in 3 years. They're near the top in total graduations. And while he's got a lot of guys making a lot of money in the NFL, there's also a lot of guys that are getting their degrees from Alabama and thus having careers selling real estate, going into business, going into banking, being engineers, whatever the case may be, whatever their degree is in. And I really think, and I'm not trying to make Saban out to be some disciple, I think, and you have mentioned this before, there are times when he is talking about the game as a whole and not necessarily where Alabama fits in there. And I really think that's he used the red meat to get everybody's attention because he knows how to handle the media. He mentioned, well, you got this going on over here and this going on over here. But then he talked about the antitrust legislation, and he said we cannot get to the point where we're paying players. We can't. He mentioned the boosters. He says you're going to give a kid a check and have him come to Alabama, and you're going to come to Bryant Denny, and you're going to be strutting on down the hall, and boy, I brought this kid to Bama, and he goes, but the coaches are not going. He's not going to play because he's not ready to play, and then you're going to get mad and say, well, I'm not going to do that again. We cannot get to the point where we're paying players. If players become employees, it's over, game over, and that's also the end. If you don't believe me, go Google Stanford. Google what Stanford had to do. Cut 11 varsity sports. Stanford with their big cash bucket. Cut 11 varsity sports. You start paying players and you turn the players into paid employees. So long lacrosse, so long tennis, so long gymnastics. The non-revenue sports are out of here. You're not gonna pay Susie Miller $1,000 a month to be on the tennis team. So I think he was speaking at a grander picture, and I just kind of was trying to get your angle at it, and then I'm going to get out of the way because I know there's got to be a lot of other people trying to call in. So thanks for taking my call, Mark. I'll hear what you have to say about it, and everybody hit that thumbs up.
Thank you, J-Dub. Always appreciate it. Have a good day. So, yeah, Nick Saban wants reform, and so he's speaking out about the entire landscape of the sport. But if he did not think, again, I'll go back to the two-parter that I laid out. Depending on where you stand on Nick Saban and his character and integrity, he's either calling these individuals out. So he called out 3 schools and individual coaches. So either he is upset to the point because he cannot compete and he's just mad, upset, frustrated, but they're not doing anything wrong. If you have that viewpoint of Nick Saban, that he's just upset. And many people in the chat are saying that. He's just pissed off because he can't compete and he sees things unraveling. Or it's Nick Saban legitimately calling out, because otherwise he wouldn't do that. When has he ever done that? The only time that I've ever seen him somewhat call anyone out is that he had to respond to something. He didn't go on the offensive ever to call anybody out. And nowhere near this extent of being this specific about buying a class. They bought this class. All right, let's take our next call here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Who's on the line?
This is Captain Hurricane.
Hey, what's going on today?
It's doing pretty good. I was going to respond a little bit to the last caller, too. Saban knows that they're in trouble. I mean, this is common sense. Where's more money at? There's more money in Miami than there is in Alabama. There's more money in USC than there is in Alabama. And they know the grip they've had on college football for about the last 12 years is coming to an end. And I'm not so sure NIL deal might have been created because of there needed to be changes. But you look at the coaching staff that Miami has got down there, that's what you have to do, because some of these coaches know what's coming. Everybody knows with these NIL deals, these kids, I believe, they should be paid. You could go out there and have an injury and end your career forever. They should be paid. The college aren't paying them. Companies are paying them. NIL deals are different companies that are paying these players. But Saban knows his reign is coming to an end. That's why he had this call that he had today on bashing these schools. And, you know, he's creating a problem where there is no problem. This is all legitimate. It's all legal. And what it boils down to, he knows that he's not going to be able to compete with a USC, a Notre Dame, a Miami, because the money is starting to flow and it's not going to stop.
Yeah, I got to say that you're most likely correct there, and it's all legal to this point because besides state laws, there are no laws. There's no guidelines by the NCAA concerning NIL. It's all just state regulated NIL laws. So,
well, so something else too, not to interrupt you, but something else too. We all know what's going on in college football for years. Some schools get caught. Some schools don't get caught. NIL deals have been around since the 80s. They just weren't called NIL deals. All colleges at some point in time, especially in football, has done things in the past that weren't literally legit, but some schools get away with it. Some schools get caught. But the fact of the matter is, now there is no cheating. It's legal to pay a player, which, like I said, you know, you could get hurt in your career. These kids need to make some money, but Saban don't need to be complaining. He's had a run now for all these years. It's time for him to just sit back and watch what's fixing to happen. And I'll take it off there on that.
well, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody joining today. And we've got a lot of great content in store coming up. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
What's going on, Mark? It's JT Sport.
JT, what's going on?
What's going on, Mark? Man, this is college football at its finest, ain't it?
This is college football at its finest.
So much.
Well, it's entertaining.
I mean, it's just so.
I don't know if it's at its finest.
Yeah, it's just so entertaining because this just kind of happened out of nowhere. So I was just browsing the internet, and then I just casually saw this Nick Saban presser that not a presser, but event that he did, and I was just like, dang, it was just random. And a lot of people, myself included, were trying to figure out where this was coming from. But the biggest thing that kind of confuses me are the people who try to make it seem like every college and college football is just running this great, honest program. And as somebody who played at a high school with a couple of high caliber athletes, high ranking, who have told teammates about how their business have kind of went and kind of given me the insight of what really goes on, you know, it's kind of like I don't really understand why people are so reluctant to accept the fact of what college football has been before NIL, because what has been transpiring with this NIL situation has been going on in college football for decades. It's just that NIL now kind of has somewhat made it legal. But why do you think so many people are so reluctant to accept the fact of what really has been going on behind the scenes? Because I don't think that, because I was trying to break it down to somebody, and maybe you can help me, because somebody was like, Alabama did things the right way, and they showed Alabama having the #1 recruiting class in 2008 after having a 7-5 record. And they recruited most in-state players. And I was like, okay, but how could Nick Saban, even though he won a national championship at that time with Alabama having a down period, convince players to pick Alabama over Auburn? Because Auburn was the best program in the state of Alabama at the time. So I don't understand why people are so reluctant to accept the fact of what has been transpiring in the dark.
Well, people are starting to see the dollar figures, or the reported dollar figures. Some of them are erroneous, of course, and they're inflated, but people are uncomfortable with that. I think this is just one of several things that irritates the typical college football fan is players jumping from school to school. We didn't have that before.
Mm-hmm.
The Alabama fan knew that their Alabama players were always going to be Alabama players, and they could see 10 years later them play in the NFL and say, that boy played for the Tide. He always played for the Tide. He was loyal to the Tide. He didn't go off and play for North Carolina and then go off and play for Oklahoma. He played for Alabama. That's the only team he ever played for. And the connection made there with the money is that the perception that they're jumping schools now in the transfer portal because of opportunities in NIL. And that irritates people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, and honestly, it's really the NCAA's fault, because it's not just football, it's college basketball too, because college basketball a couple of years ago had this big FBI investigation where Arizona, I think they fired their head basketball coach because of the repercussions of it, and there were a couple of other things that ended up from it. So college basketball and college football have pretty much been built off this for years. And it's the NCAA's fault for allowing it to get to this point. But as Paul Farnbaugh said this morning, it's kind of like, how does the NCAA regulate everything? How does the NCAA really oversee everything when there's so many programs to watch? And like somebody else said earlier, the previous caller, I believe, said this. I mean, think about the schools who haven't gotten caught yet.
But at this point, caught doing what?
Dude, that's a good point. Honestly now it's basically, even if people accuse Alabama of playing players under the table, which pretty much almost every program has done up to this point, does it really matter what has happened in the past now? Because it's in the past. This is a new era now. So with the NIL, and I'm gonna hang up and let you go. But if you was in the situation where NCAA called you and they said, hey, Mark Rogers, we want you to become the commissioner of college football and help us kind of solve this problem, what would you do in the commissioner's role to try to kind of rectify this whole entire situation? I appreciate you for taking my call and keep up the good work.
Well, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much for that, JT. Have a good day. I have gone on and on in previous shows about what I would do as commissioner of college football and laid that out. I'd like to get to all these phone calls coming in and talk a little bit less myself, because you guys obviously have a lot to say. But I do want to highlight one comment that came in here. I wish I could find it now, because I want to read it exactly as stated. Jason, this is a great point that nobody thinks about, including myself. Typically, I have thought about it, but it typically doesn't go through my equation when talking about making these players employees, because I completely don't think that's the way to go, and I just don't ever consider that as an option. But we all think of that as being beneficial to the players. But as soon as they become employees, as Jason is stating right here, we don't want college athletes to become employees who can get fired for not being that good. So right now there's protection through scholarship. Let's say you're a complete bust. Well, you got a scholarship. You've got a scholarship. 98% of them are just balling on scholarship and need to get their degrees whether they know it or not. And that was one of my previous points, whether they know it or not. The typical athlete, and one of the reasons they're able to excel in high school into college, is that they've got a lot of confidence. They've got big egos. So their perception of their own abilities is higher than it truly is. I've told this story a couple times, and I'll tell it one more time, and probably another dozen. Mississippi State made the Final Four in 1996. I followed the team all the way through the Final Four, and I covered Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama in particular at that point. And one day I'm standing on the court during practice with the Mississippi State head basketball coach, Richard Williams. We're just talking, just the two of us, because his players are in the locker room. And they're getting that was either before practice. It must have been before practice. So anyway, we're standing out there and we're just talking. And he just had two players drafted in the first round of the NBA draft the previous season. And he knew that this team was going to scuffle, and he was going to have to really coach his arse off to get them to play anywhere close to NCAA tournament ability. But he told me during the course of a really insightful conversation, very smart guy, teacher, educator. He said, "Mark, do you know how many of those players in that locker room are going to play in the NBA?" And I said, "I don't think any of them." And he said, "Exactly. But they played with two guys last year who were first round selections. So they think since we played with them, we're going to be NBA players as well." He said, "None of them are going to play in the NBA." He said, "You know how many players in that locker room believe they're going to play in the NBA?" He said, "Almost all of them think that they're going to play in the NBA." Do the math. College sports to the NFL, most of them need to either learn something in college that they can catapult into a career, or they need to make contacts with people. Or now, maybe they can make enough NIL money. I don't think any of them that will not play in the NFL could make enough NIL money to last them that long. But they can potentially, if they're smart investors, make enough in NIL to get them off to a good start in life. Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? This is Dr. C.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, I just have a quick question, and I'll get off the line because I know you got calls and I don't want to take up too much of the time. But is this potentially something that, if it's not fixed, causes Saban to retire? And that's my question. And I'll let you go because I know you got people to talk to, but I love watching the show and hearing it. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate that. Well, I typically answer these questions in this way, that I don't know the man, so I don't know what motivates him. I don't know. So we can only speculate what drives individuals. And we've got a coach that, by any other measurement, is near the end of his coaching stint because of his age, even though his faculties are all with him and he's doing a great job still and is one of the best in the game. Sure, this could be something that either because out of sheer annoyance of the game going to places where he didn't want to see it go, even if he's still successful, just seeing the game go to places in regards to it being semi-professional, that may irritate him to the point where he just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. Or because of it going to places where it's allowing others to compete at a higher level and compete with him, that it drives him out of the game from the standpoint of not being able to dominate anymore. Yes, those are the two reasons why I could see this issue driving Nick Saban out of college football. But will it? I don't know the man. We've got Tony Siracusa of Last Word on College Football standing by. I've got one caller in queue. Please jump on here and make your comment, and because I want to get this call in because you've been on the line for a while. So welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Mark. I'll be brief.
Oh, that's okay, Lemansky. What you got?
I thought you had somebody waiting to join the show. Okay. Well, I don't have a big long rhetoric on this, but I really like Jason, what he's leading into, and I'm gonna go right to Nick Saban. And if you know Nick Saban's history, his family operated a gas station in not that big a town, and he supported that gas station. He worked at that gas station, so his roots come from. And you know me, Mark. It's kind of that I've talked about Hayden Fry's roots on the farm. They rented a farm, couldn't stay on the farm economically. His roots were pretty modest. When Nick Saban went from the Dolphins to the Alabama, and I'm a Big Ten guy, so I'm going to say some nice things about Nick Saban on this call. He went back to college because him and his wife, especially his wife, loved college football. He could have probably made a lot of money in the NFL. I think he had a bad situation with the Dolphins, but his wife especially helped him make that decision. Alabama talked about his wife when he took that job. I would like to believe, and I do believe, he's coming from a good spot in his character, knowing what college football has done for him, his family, his kids, his grandkids, his great-grandkids. And I think he's, like all of us, concerned and maybe even scared a little bit what the sport's going to look like for his grandchildren. And I think he's getting out in front and being more vocal. He probably has less to lose than anybody. He's probably had a long enough career where he's going to risk it. Some colleges, some coaches, some athletic directors are going to hide and not be out front and take the risk. And I'll let you comment and hang up if you want me to, because I think we have to have somebody speak out and beg for leadership, because we needed it yesterday. It's all yours.
Thanks, Lemansky. Appreciate your support, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good day.
Yeah, have a good day.
All right. We will take Lemansky's comments straight to our guest here, Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football, because I think much of what Lemansky stated is similar to the heart of where I want to go with this conversation, and Tony will have so much to provide on this one. Tony, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Great
it's amazing.
Such
a boring and dull off season, isn't it?
Absolutely. I want to make sure, since I'm hearing you through my monitor and not my earpiece, I just want to make sure that we're okay. Okay. Listeners, viewers, are you hearing Tony on the broadcast? Because usually I hear you through my earpiece and I'm hearing you through the monitor. Tony, one more time. Yes. So we are good. All right. Very good.
Okay.
Tony joins us from Last Word on College Football. Get on over there. Check out Tony and the rest of the staff that does such an outstanding job and has supported me in tremendous ways through the years. So, Tony, I don't want to pigeonhole you in any such way because you will have perspective on this in a way that I will probably not lead you, but I'm going to direct the first question and then you can take it from there.
Sure.
Nick Saban, if he was irritated and not understanding and not agreeing with the way all of this is headed, could just make some generic statements concerning, the NCAA should be allowed to do X, Y, and Z. We need to, the antitrust portion of his statement would be the direction that this would be headed. He could even generically state, hey, things are going on like A, B, and C. But he specifically just ramrodded Texas A&M, also went the Jackson State route with Deion Sanders, and also Miami on the basketball front. So he either, and again, I stated this a few minutes ago, that if you're a believer in Nick Saban's character and integrity, knows that they are running amok and not adhering to the guidelines and the laws in place. Or if you're not a believer in Nick Saban's integrity, you're thinking he's just whining and complaining because he's not getting his way.
Sure.
And he's calling people out.
I think, I go back to my days in journalism school. And one of my early journalism professors used to tell us, when you're done writing the story, take your fingers off the keyboard, stop writing. What Nick Saban said last night for much of his speech, because I watched all of it early this morning, he was correct. He was absolutely correct about a lot of things. We published a piece a few days ago about the collective versus the NIL. They are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. The NIL was intended to be, a local sponsor. We'll use a car dealer who wanted to get the quarterback from Mark Rogers University. And the quarterback goes and does some marketing and does some promotion, and they use his name, image, and likeness. And he gets paid $10,000, $15,000 from the car dealer, whatever it may be. And that was a direct connection specifically for the use of name, image, and likeness. As our article stated over the weekend, the collectives, and I don't say this lightly, the collectives are legalized money laundering, because you're getting money in from a lot of different sources. You're getting in from alums, boosters, sponsors, whatever it may be. And then you, as the collective, are doling out the money to chosen players, a lot of times with no regard as to where the money came from. Because if your $10,000 that you're giving your wide receiver, it was $10,000 from a booster, that violates NCAA rules. It violates NIL rules in most states. It is a complete aberration from what was intended with the NIL. You have schools that are paying offensive linemen $50,000 a piece just to be offensive linemen at their school. That's not name, image, and likeness. That's suiting up in our uniform and playing. Nick was right. This is a problem, and it's a huge problem that the NCAA has no control over right now. The horse is out of the barn. And as someone who rides horses, at least once a week, I can tell you they don't like going back in the barn when they don't want to. And then Nick went off the rails from there. He was right. He was right. And then, whoa, he was so far wrong. He tried defending the NCAA by saying, we're here because of the litigation against the NCAA. No, absolutely not. We're here because the NCAA failed to see the writing on the wall years ago of what could have been and should have been, and where they could have played a role in managing and monitoring what was going on. And Mark Emmert acted with such hubris that he was certain that even as he lost lawsuits at the appellate level and the circuit court level, that he was going to win at the Supreme Court. So no, this is not because of litigation against the NCAA. This is because of the NCAA that we are in the situation we're in. Then, as you point out, he took it personal. He went at Jimbo Fisher. He went at Deion Sanders. He went at these guys with really nothing more than than proof and innuendo. Because if you're going to make those claims, you better be able to back them up. And part of the reason we can't back them up is I blame some of my colleagues across the country, none who work for Last Word, but writers and media across the country who aren't making the distinction between what is supposed to be and what is, what NIL was supposed to be and what we are doing, and what is reality, right? We all saw the story about this quarterback, high school quarterback from Southern California who's getting $8 million to go to Tennessee. Really? Where is it? Where is the paperwork? Because let me tell you, we have one of your regular guests from our site, Travis Kenobi, is a licensed attorney in 2 states, and he has helped me go through the paperwork of the NIL laws in every state that has them. It would be a violation of Tennessee state law to make that inducement, not just NCAA rules, Tennessee state law to make that inducement. So where is the paperwork? There isn't any. The reporter who broke the story was taking the player and his NIL attorney at their word. Come on. You got to do better than that, media. You got to go beyond the surface and dig a little deeper. So the media has presented stories which Nick Saban then jumped all over as fact. Has A&M paid all of these players to come play there? Again, it's a violation of state law in the state of Texas. So you're making some pretty significant accusations beyond just whatever's on the surface. And, I look at, Ross Bjork put out a statement about an hour ago. And of course, they stand behind their coaching staff. They stand behind Jimbo Fisher. They said they have done everything within the letter of the law within the state of Texas and the NCAA. Look, Nick, unless you can prove something otherwise, man, you can't go, flinging accusations like that they bought their entire recruiting class. Where's the receipts, man? You're going to make an accusation like that. As a journalist, if I make an accusation like that, I got to come with receipts. I'm going to hold Nick Saban to the same standard.
So when you're saying the distinction between buying the players, paying the players, and I'm not talking about your first point about just paying them to play, but even within the NIL structure, legal versus illegal would be offering that player and signing them prior to them being on campus, signed, enrolled, all of that.
Absolutely correct. You cannot use this money as an inducement. There's no gray area in that. Now, a lot of collectives are using it as an inducement, and some have acknowledged it. There's one, and I may not get the name right, so I'm reluctant to throw it out there, but there is a well-known collective that is working with the University of Tennessee, and they have acknowledged to reporters that they've talked to high school kids about going to certain schools. Again, if there's no enforcement, this is going to get off the rails so quickly. I think another thing happens though with what Saban did. You got to be careful if you're going to throw stones at glass houses, because glass houses sometimes have skeletons, and the skeletons are going to come out of the closet, and you are going to see players, former players, recruits, whatever, start to rat out Nick Saban. Earlier today, Sua Cravens was a 5-star recruit back around 2013, wound up going to USC, played it was an All-American, played a couple years in the NFL. He pointed out that when he was recruited, he was being offered $15,000 to make visits to schools. And I'm going to go direct to his quote because it matters. All of them were southeast of the state of Texas. He's throwing the SEC under the bus, as a whole. He pointed out that he had brought that up to some of the Pac-12 schools that were recruiting him. And the Pac-12, of course, was still reeling from the NCAA Reggie Bush, time. And the Pac-12 schools wouldn't touch even the thought of giving them money because they were afraid of the NCAA and the potential penalties. The SEC has long ago abandoned any fear of the NCAA and Mark Emmert or his predecessors. And so I think that, there's a little bit of, look, Saban brought up in a different interview earlier in the week, he wants to see the parity come back to college football. And I laughed. When has there been parity? Look, man, I went to my first college game as a young kid in 1972. And I grew up in the 70s and the early part of the 80s when there were no scholarship limits at universities. You could have as many scholarship football players as your university could afford. And the Alabamas and the USCs and the Ohio States and the Notre Dames and so on used to have 115, 120 players on their roster, some of whom would never see the light of day. But it was about keeping them from your rivals or your other conference opponents and having them there. There was no parity. There hasn't been parity in college football for 50 years. And so I've got a problem with Nick going as far as he went. He was right with the NIL and the collectives, but then he just drove his car right into a ditch.
So Lemansky's making a comment. I appreciate the credit there. Yeah, I reposted a video. I just took a clip from 2013 after the Johnny Manziel situation, where he allegedly signed autographs and was paid. The NCAA didn't say that they had found him guilty, but they still suspended him for the first half of the first game. So we had that situation. We had the tattoo gate at Ohio State. We had Ed O'Bannon, which is a historic case, of course. We had a Northwestern collection of athletes that were pursuing unionization. We had all these warnings, and not all of them under this umbrella, but in various ways in which the athlete is looking for benefits and pay for play, or pay in this case obviously to benefit from their celebrity. And we're going back 10 years and the NCAA did nothing. Right. Maybe I'm asking the impossible question, but why would they not act?
This is why we are where we are. This is why chaos reigns through this system right now, because you are 100% right. There were all the warning signs, and Mark Emmert would talk about window long. So it was, again, I use this word with the NCAA and with Emmert in particular, it was hubris to think that the NCAA was going to rise above this and maintain their place in college sports. You're right. The warnings were there. They have been there. You could have been out front of this and gotten players some stipends, some money. The Northwestern case, look, the Northwestern case with wanting to unionize was actually never about money. People forget what it was extended health care beyond their playing days. If they had to retire during their playing days because of an injury, they wanted to continue to be carried on the school's health plan, and they wanted guaranteed scholarships. You're not going to cut us after 1 year because, we're not playing well. We want that year-to-year scholarship to be 4 years. And of course they were completely right. The challenge was they went to the National Labor Relations Board, which said, you can have all these things, but you're going to be an employee. And there's a million pitfalls to making college athletes employees of the university. But all of these things have been there. And, I was joking with a colleague the other day, but I'm becoming more and more serious when we talk about being out front of issues. And I realize this isn't what you brought me on to talk about, but you look at what happened with the Pac-12 yesterday, and they're deciding to get rid of the divisions to decide the conference champion. You're going to take the top two teams, et cetera, et cetera. And you look at what George Kliavkoff did, right? The ACC and Jim Phillips have been talking about this for 3 months. Kliavkoff, no media, no leaks, no talk about anything. And all of a sudden, yesterday in the middle of the afternoon, I get hit with this alert from the Pac-12 media department. And he got unanimity from the chancellors and presidents, the athletic directors, and even all 12 coaches signed off on it. And boom, it's done. because he was out front. He saw that this is how things are going to be going down the road. The ACC is going to do it. The Big 12, who knew 5 years ago Bob Bowlesby was right when he said we shouldn't have to have divisions to play a conference championship game. We want the two best teams. So Kliavkoff was ahead of this. And I get back to the part where I used to say tongue in cheek, but now I'm serious. Kliavkoff should be the next NCAA president, because he's not worried about the historical and what should have been and what could have been. It's here's a clean slate. Let's reimagine how this works and let's build it from here and go forward. If the NCAA doesn't go to the model of an executive committee, which I think is likely what they're going to do, and they wind up naming a president, hey, I'm putting George Kliavkoff's name in there.
So I think the two issues basically that most people have with the way this is headed, I believe I've got a decent pulse on all these comments that come in here every day, is one we just touched upon. There being a level of purity to, and I don't want to be Pollyanna, head in the sand, but still there being a level of purity to the collegiate decision from the student athlete. Let's base it on the relationship with the coaches, who has the best football program, where do I want to go to school and earn a degree, who's strong in different areas of academic pursuits, and where's the location of the school, all those things, versus where can I make the most money. Now that information is going to be circulated. They know other athletes that go to school there. They can have those conversations, absolutely, but they're not being a pre-planned and orchestrated deal that brings them on campus. Okay, we address that to a certain extent. Number two would be the transfer portal and the thought that, we all grew up with most of our players, the great majority of them playing for one school, and, your favorite UCLA Bruins players always played at UCLA. You could follow them into the pros and always have that pride that they were always Bruins. Well, that is diminishing before our very eyes. We're not going to be able to watch Monday Night Football in 10 years and say, he was always a Buckeye. He was always a Bruin. And I think that bothers your average college football fan. Well, we've got a transfer rule. Absolutely. But I also don't want to put artificial restrictions on the athletes.
Correct.
At the same time. So we do have a transfer rule. It doesn't seem to be enforced. There are comments made out there that litigation would be one of the reasons why. Do you have any thoughts about why the NCAA doesn't seem to be enforcing that, where at a time it seemed to have to be a grave matter that would incur a waiver, a family member is sick. I'm all for those type of outlier situations.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things, because you hit on a lot of really good points. One, the purity of the game and wanting to go play where you want to play. And Nick Saban took a shot at one of those today. Travis Hunter, who went to go play who signed with Jackson State, Deion Sanders, and accused him of getting $1 million when, again, no proof of it. And it would violate Mississippi state law with regards to the NIL. And Hunter even tweeted out today, he said, I got $1 million. Really? My mom is still staying in a 3-bedroom home with 5 kids. Where's my $1 million? Travis Hunter wanted to go play for Deion and an HBCU. And instead of applauding that decision, we got people tearing it down and assuming the worst, because the purity of it has been taken away, and we've become very jaded and cynical about what we assume people's motives to be. With regards to the NCAA, I was on a call with Jay Billis, probably about a month ago. And Billis brought up the point that the NCAA used to be bothered by lawsuits or potential lawsuits. Now they fear them with their very existence, because not only did they go to the Supreme Court and lose, they had Justice Kavanaugh calling them an illegal cartel. They had a 9-0 vote against them. When does the Supreme Court have a 9-0 vote on so much as a lunch order, right? But they could all agree that the NCAA was awful. I think part of the challenge, as you point out, is that NIL and the transfer portal came roughly the same time, which was never the intention. But the legal process and the timing of things made it so. And so the two have become intertwined. Is someone transferring because they're getting money, they're getting a promise of NIL money, or they're seeing NIL opportunity here. I have no problem with the transfer portal. You get your one free transfer with immediate eligibility. After that, you've got to either be a grad student to get the immediate eligibility or have some other waiver type cause. And all of that is fine. Coaches get to come and go as they want. You can't hold the players to a different level. The problem is the two issues are being inherently intermingled. Whenever you have something new, there's always unintended consequences before you bring in the fixes, right? If you've got an Android phone, they release a new iOS and it does terrible things to your phone, and then they put in, here are the bugs to fix it. And that's really where we are. We have gone from the horse and buggy era to high-speed cars that are crashing. And, so you don't go back to the horse and buggy, you fix the high-speed cars and the drivers, but the NCAA is sitting on the sidelines watching it happen, and it needs new leadership like today, So I think that that's the only way some of this gets fixed. I think you have member schools who want it fixed, who want the changes. They're going along with the game as it's played, because if you don't, you're going to get creamed. You're going to be obliterated in the process. So they're going along with it, but they'd like to see some significant changes. So I think if you put someone at the top that can bring about certainty with what it looks like going forward, this can still be fixed.
There's so much talk, and you brought up the name of the Pac-12 commissioner in terms of making him NCAA president. That was your nomination, correct? NCAA president or a commissioner of college football. Those would be two different things to us, could be to a certain extent. Do you think we're there? That's been a hot topic, having a commissioner of college football, because I think COVID, the pandemic, taught us a lot of things in regards to how the sport is structured and who has the power and who's going to make moves. And now we're learning so much more through NIL and the transfer portal. So you think that's a good direction? Do you have any faith that that's going to, that the powers that be are going to be able to come together and collaborate to that degree? Shoot, to your point, these conferences can't agree on. I know you were making that comment about other entities, but
right
about the Supreme Court. But I would say the same thing about these conferences. But maybe they've learned something through all this.
I think I've talked to a handful of coaches who all see this going in one direction, which I'm not sure I like it, but I see why, which is college football pulling away from the rest of college sports and letting the NCAA have everything else. The selection committee doesn't want to run March Madness. They don't want to run the college softball World Series. They don't want any of those things, but college football gets set across here. I think you're going to wind up again with some unintended consequences if you do that, mostly financial on behalf of the school, and it's going to decimate a lot of schools and their athletic departments. It'll wipe out some of the other sports that can no longer afford to be paid for. That's a whole other qualitative conversation that can be had. But I do think that there is a path that 3, 4, 5 years from now that you're going to get a serious look at that and have a commissioner of college football while the NCAA is running, everything else with whomever is running the NCAA at that point. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle where we are now, but there is smoothing out the bottle and taking away the broken glass and fixing that. So that's what I see the immediate next 12 months being. And then you can start to look at the next steps from there.
I have been hurriedly attempting to find Tony's article on NIL. Tony, the best way to find that is it's not a huge, comprehensive, incredible read. It's comprehensive, but it can be taken in 10 or 12 minutes. So it's a great read from both of those standpoints. So Tony, that's a tremendous work. Where can we find that?
I appreciate that. If you go to Last Word on Sports and you click on the college football button, we published it, I believe, Saturday or Sunday. So you'd scroll down on the left side and you'll see it in there. You may have to click on the button that says older stories or whatever the case may be. But if you keep scrolling down to the stories that we've already run over the last week. You'll see it in there with the big picture of the NCAA building and all of that. And it is, I mean, that's where, and I make no apologies. Look, I've got an interview next week, a one-on-one exclusive interview with the athletic director at Wake Forest, and their collective is different than others. And, you know, I'm not sure he's going to like the fact that I called all collectives legalized money laundering, but that's what it is right now in the form in which it's running. So it's, you know, that's that there are, again, the unintended consequences with, but in this case, it's with nobody minding the shop.
Great stuff, Tony. Thank you so much for joining us to provide your perspective on a short notice this afternoon.
Always glad to help out, Mark. Always glad to do it. Take care.
Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. Always a great source, flat out just to talk football, but especially in these matters that address the landscape of college football and where we're headed. We certainly appreciate Tony's perspective. There was a comment just made in the live chat concerning the Pac-12 and the moves that were made, announced yesterday to ban the division format starting, bam, this season. And we addressed that on our live show yesterday. So check that out. We had a great conversation concerning that. All right. We still have the phone lines open at 860-499-3332. I will get that number back on the screen. If anyone else wants to address the dispute. So there's a large, big picture portion of this conversation, and we've addressed most of that. Then there's more of the emotional, visceral portion of this, which is watching Nick Saban, arguably the greatest coach in history and the most accomplished, certainly in our lifetime, taking on Jimbo Fisher and the back and forth there like nothing I've ever seen. Can anybody remember a time when two college football coaches were this public and this direct to call each other out? Neither one of them by name, but they were obviously speaking about each other and using terminology like God, czar, despicable. You know, this is serious stuff. First, to quote Nick Saban on Jimbo and Texas A&M. I mean, we were second in recruiting last year. Saban told this Birmingham businessman's audience. A&M was first. A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. We did not buy one player, all right? But I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it. It's tough. And then later about Jackson State and Deion Sanders. Hell, read about it in the paper. I mean, Jackson State paid a guy $1 million last year. That was a really good Division I player to come to the school. It was in the paper, and they bragged about it. Nobody did anything about it. I mean, these guys at Miami that are going to play basketball there for $400,000, it's in the newspaper. The guy tells you how he's doing it. All right. Let's get to our next call. The Travis Hunter situation was mysterious in that if you know anything about Travis Hunter's recruitment, he has been a Florida State fan and locked in on Florida State. And from the time that he committed 2 years before National Signing Day and would show up at everything possible concerning Florida State football and was on campus constantly and recruiting players to Florida State. Actively recruited. I've never seen anything like it. He had been on campus more times than Mike Norvell in the last year or so. And then all of a sudden on National Signing Day, boom. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
My name is Scott. How you doing, man?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing well. How's it going today?
Oh, not too bad. I may have a little personal bias as an Alabama fan.
We all do. So
However,
that's okay.
I tend to agree. I tend to agree with what Nick Saban is doing and the premise of everything he said. I don't think he was necessarily trying to single out Jimbo Fisher, although that's ultimately what happened. I don't think that he was trying to single out Deion Sanders, although that's what happened. I think it goes to the greater point of what college football has now become. What are we doing? Saban has warned people over and over and over again, from up-tempo offenses to now, NIL and the transfer portal, of what college football would eventually become. People do not heed his warnings. I feel like what he's saying is more to the point of, listen, somebody needs to step in and regulate this before I go out and dominate this again. What do you think?
Well, I do think that anybody with half a brain knew that we were headed in this direction. And again, I do not call myself any kind of visionary in any way. There's a zillion people smarter than me, but I posted a video in 2013 that said the NCAA needs to get a handle on NIL. So that was 9 years ago. But the issue that I have with the way Nick Saban did this is similar to what Tony just told us in our interview with Tony Siracusa, is that unless Nick Saban's got proof, you cannot go out in public and call people out. Number one. Number two, if what he is saying about the model not being sustainable, and I completely agree with all of his points, the important points are exactly what you're stating. The landscape of college football, the big picture, not his feud with Jimbo Fisher, him calling out Deion Sanders. It's about rules and regulations, what's best for the athlete, what's sustainable, what's fair, all those things, and putting the best model together. But the problem with the way he approached this is that got lost. Most people are going to be attracted to the feud. That's what gets the headline. That's what the headline is on ESPN. It's about the feud between Saban and Jimbo and them calling each other out and calling each other names. And when you use that strong language and when you specifically call out, I've been watching college football for 45 years. I've never seen anything like this, anything close to two coaches going at each other's necks like this. Well, that's going to be what's going to catch everybody's attention. That's the entertainment of it, unfortunately. And what's going to get lost is that Saban's calling out, not calling out the NCAA, but basically calling out the environment of where we stand and that something needs to be done. That kind of gets lost because of him calling out Jimbo Fisher.
I understand that point. I get that entirely. However, on the same token, I have not known Nick Saban to be one to come with baseless accusations in his coaching tenure.
True.
I haven't seen that out of him.
Absolutely.
I feel like he's probably, if he's making these kinds of accusations, he's probably got the receipt.
Well, you make a good point there. And I said this several times during the time that we've been on, is that I've never seen Saban do this. The only time he's ever made anything personal is when somebody first made it personal and he was just strictly clarifying the situation or defending himself. He has never gone on the offensive to call anybody out that I remember. So that's to your point, that he may have something.
You've also got to look at the last rant Jimbo Fisher went on too, where he alluded that Nick Saban was a clown. That was definitely pointed at Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban. And this is, private stuff that's going on in the back room, private talks between these people. He said and she said, and I don't want to get into a bunch of that. Mainly my thing is, I think if he said it, he's probably got the receipts to back it up, or somebody close enough to the inside of that program to know that that's what's transpiring. And, I don't feel like it was necessarily a personal attack, even though that's what happened. I feel like it was to the greater point, and we're going to have to move past the fact that he did kind of call out Texas A&M and Coach Prime and get to the point where we understand why he did it. Anyway, I appreciate you having me.
Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. You have a great day.
Yes, sir. You too.
I think we also need to understand that, at least from my perspective, and this is all opinion, but I think it's pretty easy to see, Nick Saban carries himself better than Jimbo Fisher. So any type of psychologist, or what do they call those people that read body language and read communication skills and who's in control of the conversation, it's the person that is under control, the person who's focused, the person who speaks with intent, the person who doesn't use certain language, versus the person who is a bit out of control, too emotional, and calls names. Well, that's Saban and that's Jimbo. Now, I'm not the type to say because this person approached it, and I did not see the video of Saban and his comments. I saw Jimbo's comments against Lane Kiffin earlier, a couple months ago, and then I saw his comments that he made this morning in response to Saban. So we know how Jimbo gets fired up and emotional and throws his arms all over the place. So that yields a certain perception of legitimacy, credibility, versus what Saban is able to do, which you can tell when he's angry, but it's controlled. And that's masterful on his account, that Saban is able to be measured, focused, and when he gets angry, so it's not about not being emotional at all, but when you're emotional, you do it in a controlled way, and you do it strategically, because it's perceived as, okay, Nick Saban's mad. That must mean something, because he's not mad and flying off at the handle all the time. It's like if you're yelling at your kids every day, they tune you out at some point. But if you hold them accountable and you're measured in your direction and clarify things, and then they do something that sends you off the deep end, and it happens once a year, well, that gets their attention. So again, I don't want to draw any conclusions, because some people are just more measured and able to control their emotions, and other people are just more demonstrative and unable to control their emotions. Both of these guys have obviously been extremely, extremely successful in life in different ways, with different approaches, I should say. And that doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong, and that doesn't mean one's telling the truth and the other is not. But if you believe in perception and you're one of those people that buy into that, you may come to that conclusion on Nick Saban's side. All right. We have a big day here at the Voice of College Football already. I did not anticipate doing this, but as soon as I saw Jimbo Fisher make those comments, I thought I was already going to strike on the Nick Saban comments from last night. And I tell you, if I had more energy at 1 o'clock in the morning last night before I went to bed, I would have cut a video or gone live last night when I saw this come down at sometime after midnight last night, but I just didn't have it in me. And then here we go. Jimbo. And this is, you could say, to Jimbo's credit, or just that he's reactionary and he decided, I'm not just going to take this. I'm calling a news conference, and here we go. And again, I stated this before, I have more respect for Jimbo and Saban in this particular matter than I do the way Lane Kiffin handled it. Because Lane Kiffin just flat out basically whined and complained about it. Nick Saban is calling Jimbo out, saying he's doing something wrong. Lane didn't say that. Kiffin basically just said they got a lot of money. They can pay players. We don't have that much money. Well, you're whining and complaining because there's 100 other schools out there that don't have Ole Miss's money. Are they complaining about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss? No. All right. I have an interview lined up with Washington State head coach Jake Dickert later today. That's not going to be live, but we're going to record that and release that later. So we're looking forward to that. And Miami Atlanta is telling us, Miami ATL is telling us that Primetime it did respond. So he must have had a news conference as well today. I've yet to see that. I appreciate everybody being here. I have so much great material to release here soon. The real MVP, I'm going to say that I hope you caught the comment that during our live stream last night with Matt Zemek that Matt made concerning the success of Pac-12 football, because I said, realistically, Matt, what does a successful Pac-12 season look like this year? And one of the things that Matt said was, beat Central Michigan in a bowl game. Can we at least beat Central Michigan in a bowl game? Beat a MAC team in a bowl game. And just the way he said it, I was doubled up laughing. I was busting out on that one. All right, but we're going to address Alabama's 18 claimed national championships. We're going to address Big Ten scheduling. We're going to address, now that the Pac-12 has stepped out and said we are playing you guys are distracting me with your comments, especially with Poser, whatever, however you pronounce that. Hey, Mark, Michigan over or under 9.5 wins. But the content on its way. We will address all sorts of overs and unders and all that sort of thing. I think that's a great line for Michigan. I think that's right on the border. So that's an interesting one, because other ones I would just flat out say, bam, you've got an opportunity there, because that's going to be over or that's going to be under. But Michigan at 9.5 that's a tough one. I would stay away from that one. But again, content is coming your way. We're going to address Alabama's 18 claimed national championships. You know, I love to do that, address national championships. We're also going to look at the Pac-12 model of 1 versus 2 and what that would have looked like throughout the history of the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, and Pac-12 championship games, and what that's going to mean going forward. But what would history have given us in a 1 versus 2 versus what we had in division championship play? And how many times would that have been a different conference championship in the Pac-12, Big Ten, ACC, and SEC down through history? Plus, we've got our top 10 running backs headed your way. Please check out the video with our top 20 quarterbacks in college football and everything else we've released. We'll be live at 8 on the Miami channel. We'll be live at 8 on the Texas channel. How are we going to do that? Well, we've got our guy, Matthew Miller, going to address Texas football live with you at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. And again, join us on our Miami channel at 8 Eastern tonight. We will see all of you soon right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, be looking out for the content. I have tons. When you see this, you know that I am taking notes and ready to roll with all sorts of great content. So we just need to get it digitized, as they say, and deliver it to you right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you at 8 tonight on the Miami channel.